The noise of drills and hammers filled the busy construction site in London. Men in yellow vests moved quickly, carrying heavy planks and steel rods. But Richard Collins, one of the city's richest property developers, was not looking at the rising buildings. His eyes locked on one figure that froze him where he stood. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and how did this story touch you? Now let's dive in. It was Emma. She wore a faded orange vest and carried a bucket of tools, her steps heavy and slow. Her face looked tired, her body thinner than he remembered. But what hit Richard like a knife to the chest was her swollen belly. Emma was pregnant. And from the timing he knew the child had to be his. Richard's throat went dry. His legs weakened. Memories flooded back, how he had accused her of stealing his family's necklace, how she had begged him to believe her, and how he had turned his back when she walked away in tears. He thought she was gone forever. Yet here she was, working as a laborer, carrying his child. Emma, he whispered, his voice trembling. She turned at the sound of her name. For a moment their eyes met. Hers widened in shock, then hardened with pain. Without a word, she turned away and walked faster, refusing to look back. Richard's chest tightened. He wanted to run to her, to fall on his knees and beg for forgiveness, but his pride and guilt chained him in place. He had believed his mother's lies. Margaret had convinced him Emma was after his wealth, that she had stolen the family heirloom. He had been blind. And now the woman he loved was struggling alone, carrying his child, while he stood in a tailored suit worth more than her wages for months. The sounds of the sight faded. He only heard the echo of her footsteps walking away. "Sir, is everything all right?" one of his site managers asked, but Richard didn't answer. His eyes followed Emma until she disappeared behind the scaffolding. Panic gripped him. He could not lose her again. But by the time he sent men to search for her, Emma had already quit the site. No trace, no address, no phone number. She had vanished into the city like before. That night, Richard sat alone in his black car, staring at the glowing lights of London. His chest ached with regret. He remembered Emma's last words before she left months ago. "One day you'll see the truth. But by then it may be too late." Tears burned his eyes. He had seen the truth now. He had been wrong. But Emma was gone, carrying his child. One question hammered in his mind, louder than the city outside. Where had she run this time, and would he find her before it was truly too late? The next morning Richard did not go straight to his office. He sat in his study, his head buried in his hands, thinking of Emma's face on the construction site. Sleep had escaped him the entire night. He had lost her once because of his own mistake. Now she was back in the city but already gone again. He picked up his phone and called his private investigator. "Find her," Richard said in a low voice. "Search every record, every hospital, every workplace. I don't care how much it costs. Just bring me an address." Days passed with no result. Emma had vanished into the streets of Birmingham, where the noise of buses and narrow flats swallowed her identity. She stayed hidden with her friend Clara, who offered her a small room at the back of her apartment. Clara supported her with food and comfort, reminding her she was not alone. But Emma's heart was heavy. She touched her stomach often, whispering to the child she carried, "I'll protect you no matter what. You will never know the pain I faced." She refused to cry, though the weight of her past crushed her chest. Richard, on the other hand, faced his own storm. When the investigator finally brought him the truth, he froze in shock. The necklace he had accused Emma of stealing had been in his own house all along. Margaret, his mother, had hidden it. She had lied, whispering poison in his ears until he pushed Emma away. The rage that boiled in him was stronger than anything he had felt before. Richard stormed into his family estate, where Margaret sat calmly sipping tea in the garden. "You lied to me," Richard said, his voice shaking. Margaret raised her brow. "What nonsense are you speaking?" "The necklace," Richard shouted. "It was never stolen. You framed Emma. You destroyed her life, and mine." His mother's face hardened. "I did what I had to do. That girl would have ruined you. She came from nothing and she wanted everything. I only saved you from your own foolishness." Richard slammed his fist on the table, his eyes blazing. "No, mother. You destroyed the only woman I ever loved. And she is carrying my child while I wasted months believing your lies." For the first time Margaret looked shaken. "A child?" she whispered. "Yes," Richard said, his voice cold. "And I swear to you I will find Emma. I will protect her. And I will never forgive you." He walked away, leaving Margaret frozen in shock. That night, Richard sat in his car once again, staring at the streets of Birmingham. Somewhere in the maze of lights and shadows, Emma was carrying his child, hiding from him. He was determined not to lose her again. But as he planned his next move, Emma sat quietly in Clara's apartment, clutching her stomach. Fear tightened her chest. She had seen Richard's eyes at the sight. He was searching for her. Would he come to beg for forgiveness, or would his mother's shadow still follow him? Emma tried to settle into a simple life in Birmingham. Each day she rose early, helped Clara with house chores, and rested when her strength allowed. The small flat was cramped, but it gave her peace. She avoided crowds, never staying too long in one place. She knew Richard had seen her. And she feared that if he found her again, the pain from the past would return. Yet at night, when the city grew quiet, Emma lay awake, her hand resting on her stomach. She thought of the father of her unborn child. The memory of Richard's face when he saw her on the construction site would not leave her. His eyes had held shock, sorrow, and something that looked like regret. But Emma shook her head. She could not trust him again. Not after the way he had cast her out. Meanwhile, Richard was moving heaven and earth to find her. He met with lawyers, contacted hospitals, and questioned workers who might have known her. But Emma remained hidden. His frustration grew. Guilt gnawed at him every second. Late one evening, as he drove past his company's office, he saw a light still burning inside. Margaret was waiting. "You are wasting your time," she said coldly when he walked in. "That woman will bring you nothing but shame. Do not chase her." Richard's jaw tightened. "I don't care about shame. I care about her. I care about my child." Margaret rose from her chair, her voice sharp. "Do you hear yourself? You are willing to throw away your name, your wealth, everything your father built, because of her." Richard stepped closer, his tone firm. "I already lost her once because of you. I will not lose her again. From this day you no longer control my life." Margaret's face darkened. "If you defy me, Richard, I will destroy you. You will lose your company, your reputation, and everything you own." "Then let it be," Richard said through clenched teeth. "I would rather be poor with her than rich and empty without her." He walked out, slamming the door behind him. The next week, Richard finally got a lead. A shopkeeper in Birmingham had seen a young pregnant woman matching Emma's description, staying not far from his store. Richard's heart pounded. He drove through the night, determined to see her face again. When he arrived at the small street, he stood outside Clara's apartment. His hands shook as he knocked. Inside, Emma froze. Clara peered through the curtain, her eyes wide. "It's him," she whispered. Emma's breath caught. Her heart raced as tears filled her eyes. She had hidden for months, but now he was at her door. Slowly Clara opened it. Richard stood there, exhausted but determined. His eyes locked on Emma, who stood in the corner clutching her stomach. "Emma," he said softly, his voice breaking. "Please, hear me out." Emma's lips trembled. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to throw him back into the night. Another part longed to believe the man she once loved was truly sorry. Her silence filled the room like thunder. Richard took one step forward, his hand over his chest. "I was wrong. Everything was a lie. I should have trusted you. Please, give me one chance." Emma's tears spilled, but her voice was cold. "Why now, Richard? After everything? Why now?" Richard stood frozen in the doorway, his heart pounding as Emma's words cut through him. Her eyes were wet, her voice trembling, but her pain was clear. "Emma," he said softly, "I was blind. I let my mother deceive me. The necklace, it was never stolen. She hid it. She framed you and I believed her lies." Emma's lips parted, her hands trembling against her stomach. "So now you come to tell me this? After months of silence? After throwing me out like I was nothing?" Richard stepped closer, his voice low with regret. "I have no excuse. I only have shame. But I will not rest until I make it right. You and the child, my child, deserve better. Let me prove it." Emma shook her head. "It's too late, Richard. You broke me once. I will not let you break me again." Clara placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, but the moment was shattered by a sharp knock on the door. Clara moved to open it, but Richard's body stiffened when he saw who entered. Margaret. She stepped into the small flat with two suited men behind her, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Emma. "So," she said with a mocking smile, "this is where you've been hiding." Emma stiffened, her hand instinctively covering her belly. "You have no right to be here," she said firmly. Margaret's gaze swept over the tiny flat, the peeling walls, the second-hand furniture. She sneered. "Look at you living in filth. And you think you deserve my son? You're nothing but a burden." Richard's face darkened. "Mother, leave now." But Margaret ignored him. She pulled out a check from her bag and tossed it on the table. "Take this money and disappear from his life forever. Raise your bastard child elsewhere. My son will not throw away his future for you." Emma's eyes blazed. Her voice shook, but her words were strong. "I will never take your money. And this child is not a burden. He is a blessing. If Richard is truly your son, then you are the burden, not me." Margaret's face twisted with rage. She lifted her hand as though to strike Emma, but Richard caught her wrist midair. His voice thundered through the room. "Touch her and you will never see me again." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Margaret yanked her arm free, her eyes burning with fury. "You are a fool, Richard. You will regret this." She stormed out with her men, slamming the door behind her. Emma's chest heaved. The stress of the moment overwhelmed her. Suddenly she staggered, clutching her stomach. Clara rushed to her side as Emma's knees buckled. "Emma!" Richard shouted, catching her before she hit the floor. Her face was pale, her breath short. "She's in labor," Clara cried. "We need to get her to the hospital now." Richard's heart raced as he lifted Emma in his arms, her weak voice calling out, "Please, save my baby." With fear gripping him tighter than ever before, Richard rushed into the night, praying it was not already too late. The hospital lights burned bright as Richard carried Emma into the emergency ward. Nurses rushed forward, taking her from his arms and placing her on a stretcher. Her face was pale, her breath sharp and shallow. "Please help her," Richard cried, his voice breaking. The nurses pushed Emma through swinging doors, leaving Richard and Clara behind. He stood frozen in the hallway, his fists clenched, his mind filled with fear. For the first time in his life, all his money, power, and influence meant nothing. The woman he loved and the child he longed to meet were in danger, and he was helpless. Clara sat down on a chair, her eyes red with worry. "She's strong," she whispered. "Emma has suffered so much, but she never gave up. She won't give up now." Richard paced the floor, every second dragging like an hour. He thought of the nights Emma had gone hungry, the days she had worked hard just to survive, and the pain she carried because of his betrayal. Guilt pressed heavily on him. At that moment his phone buzzed. It was Margaret. He answered with a cold tone. "What do you want?" Her voice was sharp. "I warned you. Walk away from her now or you'll lose everything. The board of your company is already questioning your judgment. If you choose her, you will have nothing left." Richard's jaw tightened. He looked through the hospital window at the city lights. "Mother, I don't care about the company. I don't care about wealth. If I lose her again, I lose everything that matters." Margaret's silence stretched for a moment before she hissed, "You are throwing your life away." The line went dead. Richard dropped the phone to the floor. For the first time he felt free. He had made his choice. Hours passed before a doctor finally emerged. Richard rushed forward, his heart pounding. "How is she? How is my child?" The doctor's face was serious. "She lost a lot of strength. We are doing everything to keep her stable. The baby is fighting, but we must be careful. The next few hours will decide everything." Richard's chest tightened as he gripped the edge of the wall. His knees almost gave way, but he forced himself to stand tall. He whispered to himself, "I will not lose them. Not again." When he was finally allowed into the room, he saw Emma lying weakly on the hospital bed, her skin pale, her hair damp with sweat. She turned her head slowly, her eyes finding his. "Richard," she whispered faintly. He moved closer, taking her hand gently. "I'm here. I'm not leaving you again. I swear I will protect you and our child with everything I have." Tears slipped from Emma's eyes. For the first time she did not pull her hand away. Her silence was not rejection, it was weary trust, fragile but real. But before the moment could settle, an alarm suddenly beeped loudly beside the bed. Nurses rushed in, shouting orders. Emma's breathing quickened, her grip on Richard's hand tightening desperately. "Don't leave me, save my baby," she gasped. Richard's heart stopped as doctors pushed him back, rushing to keep Emma alive. The room filled with chaos, and Richard's world hung on the edge of collapse. Richard stood helpless at the corner of the hospital room as nurses and doctors surrounded Emma. The sound of the machines and hurried voices echoed in his ears. He wanted to fight, to shield her from the pain, but all he could do was watch. "Stay with me, Emma," he whispered, his fists trembling at his side. "Please stay." Clara stood just outside the door, her hands pressed together in silent prayer. She had seen Emma suffer for months, but she had never seen her so fragile, so close to breaking. After what felt like forever, the cries of a baby pierced the air. Richard froze. His chest tightened, his eyes filling with tears. The doctor lifted the tiny child gently before the nurses carried him to be cleaned. Richard had never heard a sound so pure, so full of life. But Emma lay still, her breaths weak and shallow. Richard rushed to her side, kneeling beside the bed. He gripped her hand, his tears falling freely. "Emma, our child is here. You did it. You're not alone anymore. Please, come back to me." Her eyelids fluttered open slowly. She turned her head, her eyes filled with exhaustion but also relief. A faint smile touched her lips. Is he safe?" Richard nodded quickly, his voice breaking. "Yes. He's strong just like you." The nurse placed the baby gently into Emma's arms. She looked down, her tears falling onto the child's tiny face. Her voice was a whisper filled with love. "My baby." Richard sat beside her, watching the woman he had once lost cradle their son. For a moment time stood still. All the pain, betrayal, and months of struggle faded into the background. But peace did not last long. The door burst open and Margaret stormed in, her face hard with fury. "So it's true," she spat. "You have tied yourself to this woman and her child. You shame our family, Richard." Emma clutched the baby closer, fear flashing in her eyes. But Richard rose to his feet, his eyes burning with resolve. "No, mother. The only shame in this family is you. You lied, you destroyed, and you tried to tear us apart. But your power ends today." Margaret's voice cracked with rage. "You would throw away your company, your inheritance, everything, because of her?" Richard's voice thundered in reply. "I would throw away the whole world if it meant keeping them safe. Emma and our child are my family now. You will never come between us again." Margaret's face turned pale. For the first time, she realized her son had slipped beyond her control. She turned sharply and left without another word, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Silence settled in the room. Richard turned back to Emma, his eyes softening. He sank to his knees beside her bed, tears still shining in his eyes. "I lost you once because I was blind," he said softly. "But I swear before God and before our child, I will never lose you again." Emma looked at him, her eyes still tired but no longer cold. Slowly she reached out her hand and placed it in his. For the first time in months she allowed him back into her heart. Their baby stirred in her arms, letting out a soft cry. Emma and Richard looked at him together, their tears turning into faint smiles. The storm had passed. The wounds would take time to heal, but they were together now. And that was enough. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us keep bringing you more stories. Turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next.